Skill-based matchmaking, hotly contested issue in the world of gaming and shooters. A lot of people say that it can ruin their time with a game like Call of Duty, or if it comes to a game like X-Defiant, it's going to ruin it, because what usually is said is that people who like these types of games don't want to get all sweaty 24/7. They want to come back home and just have a fun time and relax and not stress about it. And that is a sentiment I think we can all agree with. Nobody likes struggle bus in every single match. It's nice to have the occasional blowout. I get that. I can understand it. But skill-based matchmaking as a concept was born out of a very real problem, which is just that for every match that you play and you kick, the other team's butt devastatingly, I mean, it's just you blow them out in every way, there's another team that's also suffering. Like, it's not as if those people don't exist, right? So if you say I want half my matches to be matches where I have 35 kills in a round of Warzone or something, and then I get first place easily and I can just relax and chill, there are people out there who suffered under that 35 kill streak, right? Like, it wasn't that much fun for them. Might have been fun for you, but those people did not have fun. Hextech, Hannah, thank you for subbing at tier 1 over on Twitch. Thank you, my friend. Thank you. So you just have to broaden your perspective, okay? You got to broaden the perspective and think about all those other players. And then you start to realize why some of these companies might want to start exploring skill-based matchmaking. Because if you have a group of players, I don't even know how I'm going to draw this, but if I always go crayon because I feel like it's appropriate for talking about video games. If we have the sweats and we have this little group over here of sweats, okay? And then we have mid-tier players. There's a lot more mid-tier than there are sweats. So we have mid-tiers. And then there's just an ocean of noobs, okay? The sweats are the ones primarily concerned with skill-based matchmaking. That's who I typically hear talk about it, is the people that are actually really good and don't like being paired exclusively with other sweats. Because when they're just paired with each other, they end up struggle bussing constantly because they're fighting other people who have 2, 3, 4 KDs, and it makes every match very, very stressful and intense. Even and fair, but not the laid-back, chill blowout type of thing that you would hope for. But here's the problem, is if they do break away from skill-based matchmaking and they put everybody into a pool together, which is what typically is requested, make a mode that's unranked where everybody gets mixed in together. There's no matchmaking based on skill. It just puts everybody into the same bucket and you play them, and good luck. The problem with that is there's a lot more bad players playing these games than there are really good players. So inevitably you're going to get, if this is, if we have a bucket of unranked, there's probably going to be a ton of, let's just say, casual or low skill players, a decent number of medium players, and then just a few sweats. But those sweats are going to crush everybody beneath them, and they're probably going to have a really good time. But what just happened? You kept this sliver very happy, but everybody else underneath didn't have a very good time. And the clearest, if you've ever played one of these games, you probably know exactly what that feels like because you've run into one of those sweats yourself. But if you look at this, let me see if I can find it. Yeah, it's 3 years ago, I think. Yeah. Aiden, who is a very, very good player, very, very good. He posted this video of him breaking the all-time solo kill record in Warzone, where he went in to quads. So they're 4-player teams, but he goes in by himself and starts curb stomping. Now, my understanding is the way that this worked at the time, I don't know if it's still the way, but the way that it works, but at the time, how I saw it explained by some esports pros was if Warzone had a team, let's just say of the team's KD averaged out to 1. Let's just say it averaged out to 1. So blue team's KD is 1. Aiden comes in, and Aiden has a 4 KD. But because he's going into quads, they divide it by 4 because it's divided by 4 players. And so Aiden's KD is now interpreted as effectively 1 for his squad because there's only 1 of him. So he's matched against 1 KD players who are significantly worse than him in lobbies. Granted, there's 4 of them that he's going up against, but they are well beneath his skill level. And as you watch this, like, you can see Aiden's having a great time. Like, he's curb stomping all these people and they don't stand a chance. So he probably had a great time during this match. Everybody that he ran into had a miserable time. And I mean, you can just see the difference in skill level with him coming in, just his movement, how he's handling these encounters tactically. I mean, it's just not even close. It's not even close. So this is kind of what happens. This effect will happen if you turn off skill-based matchmaking. Is you'll occasionally run into somebody like an Aiden who's having a great time getting 60 kills in a single match, but everybody that he runs into has a terrible time. And that's the bigger issue for, geez, you remember when that Dragon's Breath shotgun was in the meta? Dude, it was so broken. Anyway, but that's what a lot of these people are requesting, is that they go back to making this much more doable. But what Call of Duty realized is that if you're looking at the broader player base, the majority of people will have a worse time. And recently this sort of popped up in discussions around XDefiant, because a lot of people tried popping into XDefiant, which notably removed skill-based matchmaking. And what happened for a lot of people was they popped in and they might have 1 or 2 rounds where they were curb stomping on people, maybe a couple of rounds that were pretty even, and then they'd have 1 or 2 rounds where they got absolutely demolished because they ran into some people who were really, really good. And that was enough of a turnoff that a lot of the more casual players left. What happens after that is that a lot of those green players that we were looking at, that huge bucket of green that was just massive, it gets cut down and it ends up being a little bit smaller. And then after they get even more curb stomped, because now there's, about the same number of medium skill players and a few very, very good players, it'll get even smaller. And then you end up with this getting even smaller until eventually there's basically no noobs playing anymore. There's a very few selection of them. In the same way, all of these guys are going to start to get frustrated because they're not curb stomping anybody anymore, because there's no more beginner players. They're all fighting each other. And so they get frustrated, but they're fighting each other while also the high skill guys are curb stomping them. So then this pool starts to get even smaller. And it shrinks down even lower, and then it shrinks down even lower. And eventually you just get all of the really high skill players that are playing each other, which was what skill-based matchmaking did in the first place. So removing skill-based matchmaking a lot of the time will just end up getting you to the same exact position you were when you had skill-based matchmaking on, but you have way less players, and you also have really bad feedback from players who are frustrated that they keep getting curb stomped by players that are way better than them. Because frankly, winning is fun. A competitive loss can still be fun, but being the subject of a curb stomping is not fun. And this is apparently what happened. Activision researchers secretly disabled skill-based matchmaking in Call of Duty multiplayer, and quote, "It turns out everyone hated it." The Call of Duty publisher recently published a sweeping 25-page paper delving into skill-based matchmaking, a sometimes controversial system that aims to connect players with opponents of similar skill level in multiplayer lobbies, and the company found that keeping SBMM intact is in everyone's best interest. Quote, "The matchmaking series, The Role of Skill in Matchmaking paper confirms that, quote, while skill is one of many factors in matchmaking, it is not the driving force behind Call of Duty's matchmaking system. Although during the research process, Activision, quote, secretly, progressively turned off SBMM and monitored retention. In other words, how many players kept playing even through matches where they were the subject of a blowout." I know a lot of people keep getting triggered. I use the word or term blowout. I'm going to keep using it because I find it funny. And quote, "It seemed that everyone hated it, with more quitting, less playing, and more negative blowouts." See, I'm not the only one using the word blowout. Okay. Quote, Playing a better opponent may push players to become more proficient over time, but being severely outperformed in their matches, our testing has shown, instead leads players to quit matches in progress or to not play multiplayer, Activision explains. And again, this is all like pretty easy to follow. If you just think it through and you're like, hey, if I'm constantly getting curb stomped, will I keep playing? Probably not, because that's not fun. And that's precisely why these people that want SBMM removed, it's precisely why those people want it removed, because they're not having fun going head to head with other players that are either just as high skilled as they are or higher skilled. So they're asking to change the rules so that they can, play with the lower tier players, but then all of those people will leave and you're left with the same problem initially, which is that everybody's just playing each other. All evidence points to SBMM sticking around for the long run, since Activision believes the majority of players can engage in, quote, all parts of Call of Duty's game design and core multiplayer with SBMM turned on. Regardless, the publisher is considering a single core multiplayer playlist that does not use skill as a factor in matchmaking, though, quote, historical testing reveals that low and mid-skill players would be unlikely to participate in such a playlist, which again is precisely what happens if those players pop in and get curb stomped by higher skill players that are looking for an easier match. So you'll just end up with the same thing. If you turn off skill-based matchmaking, their testing has shown that low and mid-skill players leave and don't bother playing those playlists. So effectively, it's just a high-skill playlist. So it doesn't achieve anything, And I think that this is, it's interesting to see it borne out in the actual data, because you can see that this is an actual paper. I will post the link to this in our chats. So if you're interested in reading it yourself, you can actually go through this, because this is a full research paper on skill-based matchmaking, how they actually do it, how it works, and the data backing up skill percentile bucket, and they break down how they match and what player retentions are like. And so if you have any doubt or question about it, this just breaks it down in excruciating detail. But the core findings are just simply that people don't like getting curb stomped. And when they get curb stomped, they stop playing. So if you turn off skill-based matchmaking fully, you're just going to end up with low and mid-skill players leaving only high-skill players who just end up playing each other, which is exactly what skill-based matchmaking was doing anyways. But now you have 80% of your player base, 90% of your player base leave. So that doesn't work. And on the flip side, I see some people like, why don't we do something like, have one playlist, as they alluded to, one playlist that is not enabled for skill-based matchmaking, and it's just a total free-for-all. Their research apparently shows that low to mid-skill players will just leave and not bother anyways. Maybe this is it. We can see that loosening skill negatively impacts our ability to keep players interested in our game. In a test similar to deprioritized skill tests discussed above, we were able to see a significant decrease in the number of players playing Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2019 and an increase in the overall match quit rate when treated with a looser skill matching. Subsequent attempts to protect only the bottom 25% of players and allow for looser matchmaking for the remaining 75% of players also had clear negative effects on player counts over 2 weeks, with increased quit rates and reductions in total hours played, both of which are well established as negative indicators of self-reported fun, which kind of makes sense. If you're having fun, you'll play more. So that lines up. Another example was a test to tighten skill in Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3. This had inverse results consistent with the results of the loosening test. Quit rate was down for 90% of players, and we saw other improvements in the experience of low skill players, KPM and SPM. However, we observed negative impacts for high skill players. As a result, this change was not rolled out as a standard approach in Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3 as we continue to strive for our balance, or for a balance in our approach to matchmaking. And this is the core thing. Our goal has always been to make Call of Duty as enjoyable for as many players as we can, and we'll continue to experiment with how we can provide a better experience for all our players. This is the whole thing. It's not about catering to the high skill players. It's about catering to the most players possible. And that sometimes means ticking off the higher skill players. Because frankly, there's a whole lot more low skill and mid skill players than there are high skill players. And I would not be shocked if there's also a lot more money coming in from low and mid-tier players compared to the smaller number of high-skill players. Like the reporting is pretty clear. I mean, with this, I think if you are opposed to skill-based matchmaking, still fully and outright, you're kind of stuck in a position where you have to call into question some of this research from them, which is kind of tough to do because unless you yourself have the data directly, I don't know how you're going to be able to do it or counter it. Megalodon Jaws, thank you also for subbing with Prime over on Twitch, my friend. Thank you. So I think that's tough to counter. And so maybe the alternative is to say make a playlist that just doesn't have matchmaking at all, or skill-based matchmaking rather. Yeah, a playlist with no matchmaking. Make a playlist that doesn't have any skill-based matchmaking. But again, whenever they've done that, low and mid-tier players don't bother playing that playlist. So it's a playlist without skill-based matchmaking that only high skill players are going into. So you didn't fix anything. Yeah. Love Train. This isn't the first time COD devs have released data, bro. COD community just can't handle the truth. Well, I think it's just Call of Duty. Like one of the reasons I got turned off from Call of Duty is because it got so sweaty all the time. Like no matter where you were playing or what you were doing, you came in with 15 guys bunny hopping all over the place and doing the slide canceling stuff. And then there was that one exploit where it was like the slithering snake exploit or something. I think they patched it out, but so it's like some way to like, I think it's spamming the like crawl, but also the prone buttons at the same time. And so you just end up with people that are slithering across the floor like a snake, but can move at like running speeds. And like when you see that coming to you in the game, it's like, okay, I'm good. Like that will get me to turn off the game. It'll just like that turns me off in the same way that running into somebody like an Aiden who just demolishes you because he's like a pro player and very, very good. That's going to make you turn off the game. And we've all been there where you play a match in a game like this and you just curb stop somebody and you just hear somebody just, you know, through the comms, okay, I'm done for the night. And then it cuts off. Like we've all been there where you hit some crazy snipe and it just doesn't feel fun or good. And so it turns somebody off and they shut off the game as a result. And that happens with these types of games a lot, unfortunately. But that's why matchmaking is so crucial. And I just don't know how you counter the data. Like if they have data that shows, yeah, when we turn skill-based matchmaking off, more players quit more frequently, more players disconnect in the middle of matches. So they're just leaving immediately. And so it's just not fun for everybody. So everybody's going to turn it off. And that's what our data shows when we're not telling you. It reminds me of what's the name of the dev who worked, I think on CSGO, I want to say it was. And he was telling a story how people were constantly complaining about like ping times. And they thought that they weren't hitting shots or they were failing because of ping times. So one day they issued a patch where they just did a flat like -50 to the latency stat that people would have pulled up. It wasn't true. Like you could have 60 millisecond pings, but they were like, okay, we'll just do -50. And so it shows a 10 millisecond ping. And people reported and were like, wow, this new update's great. I feel so much sharper. My shots are hitting better. This is great. It's like nothing changed, but people's impressions of things changed. Their perception of things changed. And it just feels like with a lot of this stuff, it's already like the impressions have been set. And unless something changes or the perspectives shift, I'm not sure if those people will ever be really satisfied. Because you can go and you can add a playlist that has no SBMM. But like they said, everybody's just going to go and play other modes. So it's not really going to do anything. But when people are tested without being informed that they're being tested, when they're just being tested on the raw data of their behaviors, you see people that get turned off to it and stop playing more frequently. You see people disengaging because it just doesn't work as well. Thank you, Crusader, for the 200 bits. Thank you, my friend. Call of Duty has completely lost its identity to me. It's no longer a special serious war game, but a discount parody of Fortnite. I mean, I've also gotten really turned off by a lot of the choices they made. I played the crap out of Warzone back during COVID and lockdowns and stuff. It was like an addiction, dude. I played a lot of it. But since then, it got way too sweaty. Some of the design choices they made were really, really weird, and I don't know, it didn't connect with me. I fell out of love with it. So Battlefield had a similar thing where players thought that a shotgun did too little damage, so they changed the audio that the shots had more bass, and people thanked them for the fix. That's really funny, Edwin. I mean, it's like I've said before with a lot of stuff, it's perception over reality, or in some cases, perception is reality. If the perception is that the shotgun does too little damage because it doesn't sound right, but they don't even realize it's because it doesn't sound right, you have to deal with the perception that the community thinks the shotgun doesn't do enough damage. So you can fix it by increasing the damage, or in their case, they changed the audio so it sounds like it does more damage. They dealt with the perception, even though factually it doesn't actually change anything. People feel better because the perception's changed. And in the same vein, like, if the perception is that skill-based matchmaking is bad, that's kind of what they have to deal with. So maybe they announce something where it's like, we're not doing skill-based matchmaking. We're introducing a new AI matchmaking. They do some buzzword like that. And it's skills, like, it's still skill-based matchmaking, but maybe they do something where they like analyze, okay, you've had 5 really tough games, very close. We're going to throw you a bone with one blowout game. For the first 50 matches we do that. And then after you play a lot with the new update, it goes back to regular SBMM. Maybe they do that and everybody's fine, and people just move on because the perception will have changed. But that's unfortunately just the problem with a lot of this stuff, is that it feels like there's very, very little that can be done to actually change people's minds. Everybody has already decided that the skill-based matchmaking is bad, and so they're just throwing a fit. But the casual gamers don't really care. Casual gamers, in fact, do care. They might not know why, but they do care when it's turned off because they stop playing as much and they disconnect and all that. He took my thing.